Hello and welcome to Broker Extra. This session is about brokers and the fallout from coronavirus, and we have a great panel and a great discussion ahead of us. Before we get stuck into it, I'd like to remind everyone we've got a great platform for networking today, so please make use of Brella. And if you have any questions as we're chatting, you can submit them, and I will try to ask as many as I can to our expert panel. Now, if I could just introduce everyone, we've got Susie Middleton, who is Deputy CEO of SCIB. We have Brendan McCafferty, who's CEO of Brightside. And we've got Howard Pearson, who is MD of Innovation Broking, and Richard Morley, who is a director at Sutton Winson. So thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it and looking forward to having a good discussion today. Brendan, if I could come to you first, and I'm going to ask everybody this question, is how in particular was your business impacted when coronavirus first hit?
Morning, Sean, and morning, everybody. It's great to take part in this, and well done you for innovating and getting us all to join in and do what's happening today. For Brightside, really the issue was operating model questions, and we set some really early priorities in the business once we realised that COVID was such a serious issue. We said that we wanted to keep our people safe, that we wanted to make sure we looked after our existing customers first and made sure that we did a great job of that. We wanted to preserve and protect cash and importantly, protect jobs too, all of which I think we've done reasonably successfully. So really the question for us off the bat was, well, how are we going to run the business if we are in a lockdown circumstance? So we took a really early decision that meant we had to build a working from home solution. So we, within a short...
Can I just ask, how early did you take that decision?
Well, we first really registered this in a formal setting at our risk committee back in the early February, which was pretty early on, really. So that was way before we saw the outbreak in Italy, for example. And we started to do some contingency planning then, and realised that to get to a working from home solution was a really big undertaking. And so we started in earnest and got going with it quickly, pretty much straight after that. So by the time lockdown came, we'd effectively already shut the offices. People were already working from home. But that was a huge manoeuvre and really quite disruptive, because, trying to keep every part of the business going with new business included was really difficult. And it did have a very significant effect on everything that we were doing. It was really quite a dramatic experience, really. Yeah,
Susie, if I could come to you, your business is obviously different to Brendan's. What was the effect on a CIB when it all first started happening?
I think we're very similar to Brendan. We'd seen things coming round the corner and had started to implement quite sort of stringent changes. We had a handful of people that already worked from home, but trying to transfer nearly over 100 staff to that system was impacted on our business greatly. I think like everybody else in the broking industry, the infrastructure was there, but there was an awful lot of work to get it so it was working well. So for the first couple of weeks, we were under a lot of pressure on the infrastructure for the IT and telephony systems. We worked really hard. Our IT department did a fabulous job to keep everything running. And within a couple of weeks, things started to sort of bed in and calm down. Obviously, our main key is to keep staff safe and also still service our customer base. We've been very proud. We've had some fantastic responses from our customers around being able to be accessible. The teams are doing extremely well with holding things together. Now it's a very different story. It's very much business as usual, and we're seeing a much more stabilised situation. And it just shows you how quickly and how effectively, when pushed, you can bring things together. And we had to bring things together to secure the business.
Yeah, it kind of forces innovation, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Howard, was it a similar experience for you?
Not really, because we're a relatively small business and customer focused. A lot of people already were working from home and were set up and did have the kit. And from early March, we were looking at the people who might not have the right kit and making sure that it was at home. Our major issue was keeping customer engagement going at that very early stage when the customers were themselves trying to work out what to do. We had on the 17th of March, Rishi Sunak saying that business interruption insurance would operate, and customers all thinking in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think that caused a lot of confusion, didn't it?
It did. So all of our efforts, I think, in March were about customer communication, talking with clients, sending out newsletters, disabusing them of the business interruption myth unless they were in the sectors where it was highly relevant, and helping them on the unoccupied and working from home issues.
And Richard, could I come to you now? What was your experience?
Well, we were essentially an office-based business before lockdown. So for us, I remember having a very difficult discussion at board level about the investment we made in cloud-based telephony and IT a couple of years ago. I would never ever complain again about cost, because the net result was we moved from being an office-based business to being remote working in the space of a few days. Our hardest difficulty was actually sourcing laptops. Our IT team were just amazing. They worked until 2 o'clock in the morning just setting up laptops.
I've heard a lot of brokers had trouble getting laptops actually, because there was just a flight towards them.
We were lucky. We had a source, and those were delivered. I always remember the laptops actually being set up, and I've taken some pictures to remind everyone when we're through this just how much good work took place. But the net result was that we're able to get people working from home very, very quickly. When I say quickly, it was literally within a few days of lockdown. We had also anticipated what was going on. We have some connections in terms of some Italian brokers we deal with. We kind of knew what was coming over the hill. I think that was the phrase that was used earlier. So the fact that we're able to react so quickly and obviously distribute the laptops, make sure people working from home, that kind of gave everyone in the business a lot of confidence. And in turn, then the communication with our clients was made that much more easier. But certainly from a telephony and IT perspective, it worked as well as it could have done.
That's great to hear. Now, I just want to come to my next question now. Would you say that this incident, this pandemic, has really driven broking to the brink? This is not the impression I've been getting as I've been speaking to people in the industry, but what would you say about that?
My view is that, and the same happened in. I've been with Sutton Winston over 20 years, so we've seen a few crises along the way, whether it's sort of 9/11 or whether it's the financial crash. The one thing for me is that we are a relationship-led business, and the important thing for us is when there's a crisis, if you stand shoulder to shoulder with your clients and you try and help them every which way you can, then you're going to come through this and out the other side. So I don't see us going to the brink. I see obviously some disappointing headlines in the press, but let's not forget what fantastic work we actually do for our customers, and certainly over the last few months, there's been some brilliant things that have been achieved, and those shouldn't be forgotten, and those should be pushed to the top of the list in terms of the headlines, and not the sort of things that we're hearing about at the moment. Okay,
Brendan, is that something you would agree with? Do you think brokers have essentially coped pretty well with the pandemic and are actually perhaps going to emerge from this situation leaner and more effective?
Yeah, well, there's certainly advantages to be gained from what's happened, and I'm sure that everybody's going to be thinking the same kind of thoughts about, well, what does this mean for the future? And actually, that's quite exciting, because I think what this episode has done is captured the opportunity to be more flexible. And certainly, me and my team are very excited about that, and so are our people. Actually, that's one of the really interesting ingredients of this for me.
Yeah, can you give us some examples of where you have had to become more flexible and where you've actually done it and thought, actually, this is really good, we need to take this forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, the key thing for us is working out, well, what could the future now look like that gives advantage to customers, which is really about accessibility, right? And it's about availability of service. And I think there's an opportunity to match that with what people would prefer to do. And when we've looked at what the preferences of our people are, and we've done that in a very active way, we've not just kind of assumed that we think we know what they want. We've gone and asked them, right? And the answer they're giving us is that only a small minority want to go back to the world that we used to occupy, an office-based, that kind of, very, very fixed regime of operating, people do want flexibility, and I reckon we can give them that in the future. We're working out how right now. So that's, you know, a key outcome for me. In terms of going to the brink, you know, it'd be really interesting to see how everybody's fared when the numbers finally appear around the estate in the months ahead. I suspect that there's very few that haven't felt an effect. I think the evidence of that is available already. And actually, I think that the worst is still ahead in terms of the economic impact, and brokers are not immune from that.
Susie, what would you say?
In your question to going to the brink, I think probably if you asked the question in the first couple of weeks of the situation, people were working longer hours, they were reacting to situations as and when they were occurring. Obviously, you know, there's some resilience there in respect of brokers. I always think brokers are very resilient. We get numerous curveballs throughout our existence. Obviously, this is somewhat unprecedented. As far as sort of clients are concerned, I think it's around having that sort of flexibility. We've seen quite clearly things that we've managed to achieve has really boosted our reputation in respect of how we are operating as a business and being fair around assisting our client base as well. And the same with the teams. I mean, we are very niche and specialist in what we do. We really understand our categories of business, and we work very closely with those affinity partners as well. So I think it's very, very clear that, you know, businesses that have taken time and effort to listen to clients will come through this with a much clearer reputation. And I think it's a potential for business opportunities going forward. So I wouldn't say on the brink. I think in the midst of the situation, the first couple of weeks when the panic evolved in respect of capacities, covers, issues with business interruption. But, you know, brokers are resilient, and we have to deal with our clients, and we have to service them.
Yeah, Howard, what would you say?
I think as brokers, we're adaptable. So where there's change, we tend to do very well. There's no doubt the economy is going to suffer a lot over the next period, as well as in the past. An accountant we deal with called Wilson's published some research this morning showing 40% of their client base thinks it's going to be worse over the next few months, and 20% thinks it's going to be better. So if, as brokers, we represent the whole economy, there must be an effect on that. But as to being near the brink, I think quite the opposite. I think we've got ourselves much closer to our clients, and we've got coming up, you know, potentially a second wave. We've got Brexit, we've got a hard market, we've got an adverse press to the industry, we've got potential state innovation, we've got online entrants. You know, we've got all these opportunities to move quickly. We're a non-capital intensive business. I think we're infinitely more relevant to our clients post-COVID than we were before.
So it's not all bad for brokers at the minute, despite the challenges.
That's my view, definitely.
If we were to pick out one thing that's perhaps had the biggest impact on the sector as since lockdown was announced or since the pandemic came over the horizon, what would you say has had the biggest impact on broking? Is it just that change in how people have had to work, or is it trading conditions or something else?
I think it's a realization that we need to go back to reading policies and understanding language and finding out what our clients' genuine needs are. Mm-hmm. I think we've been moving into a commoditized, price-led world for a very long time, and suddenly we all had to become business interruption experts overnight. And in fact, we should have already been business interruption experts.
Yeah, is it? Have you all had clients affected by that business interruption debate? I don't know if anyone wants to mention.
Yeah. Yes, we have.
So I'm sure I know we're not going to get into the ins and outs of that BI dispute in this conversation, but in terms of how you have looked after clients who are affected by that, what's been your process?
Well, we immediately put a project team in place. We actually drew 6 people out of the business, and we went through effectively every single commercial policy looking at the business interruption cover and categorising the individual clients. We've obviously kept in touch with those clients that are part of the test case, and we're in a position now where we believe quite strongly that we're in a good place to respond once we know what's going to happen at the end of the High Court action. I think the other consideration for us is a serious point, is that obviously from a professional indemnity perspective, our professional indemnity insurers are asking us what we're doing. So given the fact that that market is very difficult, I think it's also a good process that we've actually been through, both from a customer perspective, but also from an internal perspective as well.
Is that something the rest of you have been doing as well, just putting all those safeguards into place and double checking everything?
Going back on file audits, making sure that we've covered, every angle that we have in respect of what we're doing, supporting our client base as well in respect of what they're pushing forward on their claims side. I think for me personally, it was a difficult situation where there was quite a delay with insurers and their slow responses. I think for us, that was a key pivotal around the actual time delays of being able to advise clients. And unfortunately, in some circumstances, insurers had agreed cover, and then you're reverting back again. So it's that customer sort of communication that was critical to us, for us to keep everybody in the loop of what to do next, really.
Yeah, it's certainly been a very challenging issue for everybody. But I just want to perhaps go back, because we do have a question from the audience. This is a question from Jude Watson, and they are wondering, as a whole, do the panel agree that staff are able to work much better and provide more output working from home? Brendan, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question, Jude. I think it's really interesting that the flexibility that I referenced earlier does seem to really work for people. So to build on what I said earlier, our survey results, when we've asked people about this, do indicate that a very small minority want to go back to how things work. And what we've got to do now is respond to that with working out what can work for customers and for staff at the same time. What we actually see in the data is that there is a modest decline in productivity, and we're able to measure that very scientifically. We think we know why that is. We think it's because of the realities that in the early days we probably hadn't given people the sufficient kit that they needed. We're doing that now.
And do you think it's because people have been trying to juggle things like childcare as well?
Yeah, that's definitely a feature, sure. And we've been very clear about wanting to accommodate that and being realistic about it. It's part of the experience of working from home, right? And it's something you have to adapt to as well.
Yeah, but when the pandemic is over, hopefully, children will go back to school, and that childcare issue won't become as apparent. Do you think then productivity might actually go up?
Yeah, I think it will, and I think that people have been trying incredibly hard as well, because they understand that this is a very unusual circumstance, and they're trying to help their customers, their clients, and the business. So they really are putting every effort in, and I'm grateful for that. I'm confident that the productivity will continue to improve, and that it's a totally workable solution. However, it's really important that we remember that we're talking about human beings here. It's vital that when you talk about building a more virtual organisation, if you like, to use that shortcut term, you have to build in the human aspects of it. You have to make sure that people have a strong sense of belonging, that there is a social dimension to what people do. We're actively looking at how do you build fun into the day in bite-sized chunks and in bigger chunks as well, to create that belonging, to make sure that people feel supported, that they've got a network around them, and know where to go for help and support.
This is actually one of the questions that is coming from the audience as well, that we're just touching on at the moment. Nigel Edwards wants to hear more about what you think the medium term on things like mental health for staff is going to be, perhaps from the isolation of working from home, and also basic things like comfort. I know one thing I had to do was buy a laptop stand and to stop my shoulders hurting, and just, there's no sort of health and safety assessment in the house or anything like that. How have you managed that sort of thing?
Initially by just issuing some very simple guidance, reminding people about taking time out, about contacting people to just talk about how things are going, saying to people that we understand that some of the constraints around kit and so on will need to be put right, and making some commitments around that. And just, building over time a sense of care and talking about mental health a great deal, a lot. And putting tremendous effort in, particularly with Mental Health Awareness Week, to raise the profile of that. One of the things that we did, for example, was put counselling available, make counselling available on a one-to-one basis with professionals able to respond to people's needs on a confidential basis. So, different lines of support being put in place for people around that. Lots of stuff about self-care and making sure that people had the toolkits available and the support of, expert assistance programs delivered by non-Brightside partners for our people. So really, it's all about care. It's all about setting a standard and a tone around that, and then being very practical in the type of help you offer people.
Okay, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel, have you been doing similar things like that?
Yeah,
Please
sorry,
go ahead, Howard. No, go on, Howard.
Okay, thanks, Ricky. The thing we changed immediately was that we went from 1 weekly meeting to 3, and we have 3 weekly meetings a week with every single person on, and we make sure that every person engages. And then we also upped the frequency of one-to-one sessions that we have separately. We're a small business, so that enabled us to have a lot of direct observation as to how people were getting on. The workload for commercial brokers in the first month was so great that most people didn't have a chance to think that much about what was going on. But now that things are becoming more a state of normal, I think we have to recognise and make sure that we're being proactive about all of the mental health issues that potentially come and are quite well documented from working at home. I don't buy into this. Everyone will want to work from home and it will all be remote workers. I think we're human beings. I think we crave company. I think we love to be with others, and I think there's massive gain from the aside conversations that you can't have over a Zoom call. So I think there will be a return to the office. I think there'll definitely be a return to the London market, because a market can't operate without people being physically there.
Okay. I think it's interesting, the debate around what the new normal is going to look like. But one question I do want to ask, which comes from David Worsfold, and if I could perhaps direct it at you, Richard. How, with everyone working from home at the moment, how do you build and sustain a distinctive corporate culture if people aren't physically together? Is that difficult? Will the cultural differences between various brokers be eroded a bit? What do you think?
Culture for us, and it's a big debate we've had as a board. If someone had said to me before Christmas that I could get enjoyment out of a Zoom call every week at 4:30 with three of the teams, we have quizzes, we have fancy dress, all sorts of different themes, etc. But it's all part of having fun as well, because as everyone has highlighted, as it stands at the moment, it is a very, very difficult market. Whether we talk about how difficult it is to work with or get quotations from the market or from insurers, it is difficult. We need to still have that fun, and part of us as a business is that we've always kind of described ourselves as sort of the Waltons, but obviously with a business edge. So we've been built on family values. But culture is exceptionally important for us. We've kept in touch with our teams. I think, as Howard's alluded to, we've actually upped the contact. And in many respects, I would say that some of the teams actually know the team members better now than they did before, because they've almost been forced into an environment, and it's worked. We've had to make it work. But one of my concerns for the future is that obviously those people working remotely is one thing, but I learnt my trade by being in the office, by listening to telephone calls. by being pulled to one side and being told that perhaps I haven't got something quite right. But without being in the office and having that connectivity with your colleagues
and kind of immediate feedback,
it's going to be very difficult, I think, for some of the younger people coming into our industry to make sure that they are properly trained and have the benefit of what we had when we were coming through the ranks.
Susie, is that something you're concerned about as well? And how are you managing that with perhaps your more junior members of staff?
We've had quite an interesting sort of split around this, actually, because we've had a number of sort of more junior staff that perhaps have had quite sort of intense training that rely quite heavily on people within the office, and they've sort of been left and have flourished from it, which is quite interesting. We've got quite a lot of opportunities and parts of the business where I think, yes, you do need interaction and you do need to bounce off each other, especially sort of in the client-focused area. But we have also got people that are working extremely hard from home and doing extremely well, and their output is a lot greater. On the flip side, you're always going to get this issue around tracking people, which we can do now through our systems. We've had some new starters while we've been in lockdown as well. And so we've actually done some virtual onboarding, very good feedback from those new starters. So that was a first for us. So yeah, adaptability, but I think it's cautiously around not losing the core of the business and the attitude of people to bounce ideas off of each other. I suppose as and when we move back into the office, we're still going to have social distancing and those sort of more chats in the, chats at the coffee machine, and those are still not going to be, potentially possible, but it does keep the sort of vibe of the business going. So we're sort of separated in sort of two minds, really. There's going to be capacity for people to operate from home, but I think, as colleagues on the panel have stated, you do need to keep the essence alive. We've worked really hard with virtual events as well, having sort of quizzes, etc. And again, I've had a couple of people say that they probably met people virtually more than they would have done across the offices, which is quite interesting. I had quite a senior person start earlier in the year, and he said it would have taken me an awful long time to get around everybody, plus 2 sites, and interact. So it's worked positively for us in some areas.
Yeah, I think it has shown just how adaptable and innovative the broker space can be, and it's something we've been doing within our own organisation too. I want to turn the discussion a little bit more to clients now. How easy has it been to maintain communication with them, what with having to change your base? Howard, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we've found that clients have been less interested in emails, and particularly after the first couple of weeks, less interested in briefing notes, which originally we sent out. The feedback showed because they were getting them from everyone. And
was that across certain niche sectors, just in terms of how they should be operating?
I'd say that was across the board. They were getting things from their lawyer, their insurance broker, their accountant, and they were getting every redundant marketing person in the world trying to call them with a little message saying, I'm just staying in touch. So what clients have appreciated is pre-booked meetings, Zoom meetings where they can see you. They've appreciated checklists to see that things were happening the correct way. And we've had amazing response to the client webinars that we put on, which were highly focused. The first one was on working at home and the security that went with that. And another one for a specific care sector, where we did some very detailed work on what new normal looks like going back in the care sector.
Brendan, how has it been, because your business is very telephone based, how has it been for your guys to communicate with your customers?
What we've noticed was, particularly in the early days of lockdown, was, you listen to the calls that our people were doing, particularly in SME. I described those phone calls as like listening to counselling sessions. Our people were amazing at giving every level of support to clients who were very distressed about what was happening to their own businesses. They were very worried and alarmed. They wanted to understand what cover they had. They wanted to make some decisions and get some reassurance. And our people were just first class at doing that. We maintained our service levels throughout. And I was just so proud of what the team did. But it's very clear that to a level will continue. It's going to be very interesting to see whether we get another wave of that, given the withdrawal of the furlough scheme and the impact that will have on small businesses in particular. So it's not over yet. There's an awful lot to make sure we still have in place, and we're very responsive in the future too.
Richard, how easy has the team at Sutton Winston found it to meet the needs of the customers?
My view is that our business splits down to various different parts. We do have a sort of an SME area which is essentially telephone based, but we also have quite a large part of our business is where we have a dedicated account manager for individual clients. The net result is that the communication there has been very, very strong. So and communication on a regular basis. We've helped some of our clients by bringing in sort of some of our health and safety teams, to particularly food manufacturers and the like, to make sure that they can operate. I think our biggest concern and the biggest area of time is essentially surrounded actually getting hold of insurers and decision making. And the problem there has been that obviously the insurers are spread. Normally you would have a scenario whereby someone will walk from office to office to actually get authority to actually do something, and we're finding, and I'm sure the rest of the panel is the same, the actual decision making process with insurers, particularly in this very, very hard market, has slowed the communication lines and therefore the service that we can provide to our customers. So that's where we've struggled the most.
Susie, you touched on that earlier. Is it still a problem, or has it eased off slightly as people have got used to this way of working?
We're still seeing insurers looking inwards, and I think that's quite frustrating, being a broker, because obviously you're at the front end with the impact of clients who, like everybody else has mentioned, are obviously going through their own challenges. So you're trying to deliver a service. We're quite lucky in the fact that we are, majority of our business is scheme niche, so we do have delegated authority, which has really bode us well through this situation. We wholesale as well, so brokers have highlighted clearly to us that they're getting a better response from us than they are their own capacities, which we've seen in our general market, our general GI business. And it's frustrating because obviously you need to be reactive to clients as quickly as possible. They're in, they might be in financial difficulty, or there's issues around their cover. So I think that has been a frustration, and I'm sure that's felt across many brokers. Getting sort of hold of key people, they're very focused inwards rather than servicing their broker panel.
Howard, do you think brokers have been put in a fairly difficult position with the slowness of insurers, and while you're trying to help your clients who, as Brendan said, are panicking, they're very worried, they're concerned about the future?
I think it's inevitable. We're a broker, and our job is to be a bit like a gearbox in a car, making the two sides mesh together. At the moment, you've got insurers, I think Chubb said 1.8 billion COVID-related losses that they announced yesterday, and Lloyd's have been talking about 2 billion. They've got some real internal issues and problems that they're grappling with, and at the other end we've got our clients grappling with those interests. The results being, as Richard said, that we've been getting some slow decision making, some frustrating decision making, some knee-jerk price increases coming out late and without consideration, and we're the buffer in between, and sometimes we're being punched from both sides at the same time, but that is what we're paid for. And we work with insurers with things like extensions to give clients time to think about what's going on. We explain to the clients that in advance that the insurers might be late on something. I think this is the moment where we come into our own. If we let our insurers and our clients speak to each other, they would all be talking with lawyers by now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have a very valuable service, and we also have to remember that we were all designated right at the beginning of this as key workers, and I think there's a very good reason for that.
Can I talk a little bit about business strategy going forward? Because obviously everyone in the broker space has had to react really quickly and firefight the situation. Now you can take a more medium-term view over the rest of the year. What have you changed about your strategy and how you want to run the businesses as we move through the pandemic? Because as Brendan pointed out earlier, it's certainly not over. Richard, do you want to take that one?
I'll happily take that. I kind of feel where we sit at the moment is that we're adapting our existing plans. We're reforecasting and then reforecasting again later in the year, because I think, as someone alluded to earlier, we also believe that there's going to be a knock-on effect when obviously furloughing ceases. We have to recognise that there will be casualties in the current climate, and we also have to anticipate a second wave, which is not the nicest thing to think about, but we do have to anticipate what's going to happen there. So I kind of think it's prudence with realism. We've done some financial sort of stress testing. We've done the sort of the worst case scenario and the best case scenario, and we've probably taken the midpoint at the moment. Obviously the phrase cash preservation seems to be mentioned in every conversation I have with our finance director. I think that the most difficult thing for us moving forward is going to be how we source new clients, and we need to find new ways of engaging face to face with new customers, because we need to gain their trust if they're going to obviously choose us as their broker moving forward. But yeah, it's going to be interesting times. But as I said earlier, we're all of us can adapt to this. It's just a question of the speed at which we move. And also as well what actually happens with the economic recovery, and also, well, importantly, how well the virus is actually contained.
Brendan, is these similar actions that Brightside are taking?
Yeah, I mean, forecasting is a nightmare, isn't it, really? I'm sure every broker out there is feeling the same pain. Working out what you realistically think is going to happen is the hardest part of where we are today. But actually, I think that really, strategically, COVID has only accelerated strategies, right? It's made you work through those questions about the future operating model. It's emphasized again the importance of digital and data and connectivity and multi-channel and all of those things. I guess as well as that, the other thing to bear in mind is what we talk about and what we focus on is our clients, which you might describe as the demand side of the coin. The supply side of insurers, somebody's already said that they're under a lot of pressure. There's a lot going on that's going to change the way in which they manage their capacity and allocate capital, and that will have effects on pricing, and that will be equally a part of who the winners and losers are in the future. I think partly that will play out again by putting pressure on brokers to say, well, why are you here? What's your right to exist as a broker? What value are you bringing? In Brightside, our answer to that is really clear. We're scale, we're niche, and we're digital. And those magic ingredients make us relevant. And if you deliver great service, you'll be okay. So it's about accelerating probably more of what we had in mind and trying to get to a point where we're taking advantage of what has happened.
Howard, is that something you've had to do as well, really accelerate the work that you're doing around strategy?
Yeah, I think our strategy and our values are completely unchanged by this, and probably justified, unfortunately, by what's going on with COVID. And acceleration is exactly what we're doing as well. Tactically, we're making changes in terms of communication. We brought forward a couple of hires, and we've been hiring people during the COVID period, but I call that tactics rather than strategy. We're lucky. We set up our business 5 years ago. We had some very clear views as to where the gap was in the market for people like us, and we feel that gap is still there and is quite apparent. So strategy, no change, just faster.
Okay, I see. Now we do have time for, got about 5 minutes left, so we have a couple of questions from the audience. The question's come in from Caroline Fisher, and she wants to know if anyone on the panel has seen any surprises, some things they wouldn't expect, like increased renewal retention in certain areas, or new business growth in sectors they hadn't thought about before. Susie, would you like to take that one?
Yes, we have seen some interesting surprises. We're seeing people, I suppose, renewing their policies quite quickly. They seem to have more time on their hands. Whether that converts into being sort of, rather than being time poor in respect of trying to access clients and get hold of clients, that's turned around quite quickly. For us, we've got quite a different sectors of business under our portfolio. We've seen growth interestingly enough, growth still in the property sector, people still insuring buildings and properties. There's no sort of dip in that particular sector. We are seeing now a revival with the leisure side being accessible again. So we're seeing quite a switch in respect of clients that have had quite poor service from competitors coming across to us where they haven't felt supported during the pandemic. So some real interesting dynamics that perhaps have come to fruition more than we thought would potentially do.
Howard, have you been surprised by anything?
I think we've had surprises from some of our clients who've been adapting their own business and giving us demands that we just couldn't have thought about before. For instance, one providing temporary housing for NHS staff, which was something we didn't have on our radar. The biggest surprise to us is that our new business numbers are up over the last 3 months, and we honestly can only put that down to the medium-term effect of marketing and people realising that we're open and active at the moment. But I think I suspect that we're relatively unusual in that.
Okay, now another question from the audience. This one's from Ant Gould. If I could direct this one at you, Richard, have client expectations with regard to online servicing heightened, and are these expectations revealing any gaps in broker and insurer capabilities?
In terms of online servicing, I think it's fair to say that in terms of us as a business, we're very much aligned to advice led. So not so much online. So it might be better.
Okay, it might be better for someone else. Yeah. Would anyone else like to take that one who feels more appropriate to answer it?
I think our experience has been that it's clear that customers and clients do want to be able to do self-service, particularly probably because we're at the bottom end of SME. But that's certainly been a feature, that the adoption rate of online chat through to use of portals has increased and taken demand out of the system. That's a customer choice playing out, and it's good to see. That reinforces our sense of strategy as well.
And Susie, I think you wanted to jump in there with a final point.
We're seeing more sort of self-service through online facilities, and I think also as well it's moved quite dramatically where people perhaps potentially were not engaged with using online have become more educated through this period, which is quite interesting because we do quite a lot of client listening and understanding profiling. So I suppose that sort of older tier is now more engaged with operating online. So it's been quite an interesting learning curve.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think we need to wrap the discussion up there. Really appreciate everyone who's joined us on the panel today, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions to the Q&A. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of them. This session is going to be available on demand in about an hour or so, so if you'd like any colleagues to watch it, please do forward it to them. Our next session is with the FCA, so please stay around for that. We're starting it at 10:45, and we hope you enjoy the next 3 days of Broker Extra. Thank you everyone very much for watching.
Thanks, Sean.